Welcome to the first episode of the Movement Docs podcast. Today we're going to be kind of introing the podcast and what we want to do with it, and then also giving you some tips and tricks for applying to PT school. Hey guys, and welcome to the first ever Movement Docs podcast. I'm Jake. I'm a recent physical therapy grad from Shenandoah University. I just got my doctorate, and I'm finishing up a master's degree in athletic training, also from Shenandoah University, and finishing up my last clinical working in the NFL. And my co-host here is Mike.
Yes, and so I'm also in the physical therapy and athletic training program at Shenandoah. I'm still in school. I have not received my PT degree yet. Just about to finish the penultimate semester where I get to start working into those clinical rotations. I have a past experience of a master's degree in exercise physiology, and I spent some time working before going back to school. So we'll talk a little bit about that too.
Yeah, so I think the two of us together kind of bring a unique perspective into this kind of world of rehab podcasts because we're still students, or, I finished up PT recently, but I'm still in my athletic training program. I'm still doing some other internships, and Mike still has. You have about a year to go?
Yeah, just about a year.
Yeah, soon. It'll happen soon.
I see the light.
And so Mike and I got together. It's probably been a year ago. We started talking about this, I think, in January of this year.
Yes.
And we kind of came up with this idea of as a kind of an outlet for the little bit of creativity that we both have. And trying to find ways to kind of grow as clinicians ourselves, and then also provide some sort of content for other people to grow as well. And that's how we kind of came up with this whole Movement Docs thing.
It's a good medium for us to provide content and also pick the brains of some people that we hold in high esteem and regard. It's a way that we can create an environment that we can learn and improve.
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, that's what we want to do, is we want to help foster the minds and brains and perspectives and techniques of everyone that's out there. Whether you're a current clinician, you've been practicing for 15 years, or whether you're a student like us that's still trying to, deal with all the tests and homework and papers and all that other stuff that comes along with grad school, and just trying to deal with your daily frustrations and come out on the other side. And so it's kind of why we chose this, and this is going to be as much of a learning experience and kind of opportunity to grow for us as well as you guys, our wonderful listeners. There's probably maybe 2 of you right now at this point. And so we know this first attempt at a podcast is probably going to be a little bit rough, but it's going to get better, and we're going to become better podcasters and better clinicians, and hopefully help you guys grow along the way as well.
Exactly. So what are we talking about today, Jake?
So I think our topic of discussion is kind of the process of getting into PT school. I know you and I both have helped out at a lot of interview days, talking to prospective PT students about and AT students as well, because we've both helped out with both departments, but kind of what it's like, what we should expect on our applications, maybe tips and tricks to set ourselves apart from that everyone else that's out there that's trying to get into PT school, and then maybe share some of our experiences and tell some stories about things that really stuck out to us, that made meaningful, impactful things. God, I'm so bad at this podcast thing. But just had really, really big impacts on us as we were applying and choosing the school that was right for us.
So it's trying to find a way to demystify that whole application process, if you will. Cool.
So why don't you kind of start us off, Mike? Tell us a little bit about, that whole change in your initial career in cardiac rehab to getting into PT, and what it was like to apply, and kind of the steps that you went through, and how you chose the schools and all that.
Yeah. All right. So buckle up. This has been a learning experience over the past decade or so, I would say, at least. And so, originally, my motivations for getting into the healthcare profession and the field in general were because of my father. He had a heart attack when he was 35 years old. And so I got to see him at his lowest when he was in the hospital, and he was all hooked up to the lines and tubes and all that stuff after his heart attack. And I got to see him at his highest too when he went through cardiac rehab and kind of got his confidence back. And so that kind of motivated me to try to continue to reciprocate, find a way to give back as much as I could. And so I worked for a little while in a healthcare profession, working as an exercise physiologist in cardiac rehab, and also doing personal training on the side. And worked a lot with the physical therapy team in this place that I was working at, and didn't feel as though I was prepared enough to help those individuals as much as I could. I felt like there was more information that I needed to learn so that I could improve my tool set and the ways that I could help individuals. And while I was doing all this stuff, I was also working with some athletes on the side and really enjoyed working with them, trying to find ways to rehab and get them stronger as well. And so was trying to find something that would combine my love for athletics as well as my love and passion for helping those rehabilitate and get better. And so I just kept thinking about it as I was pursuing, trying to figure out what options did I want to take. Did I want to go to PA school? Did I want to go to PT school? I knew I really loved like orthopedics and all of that. And so really considering what was important to me and what I valued. And so I really enjoyed the aspect of being able to have a high amount of contact time with patients. I really enjoyed those personal interactions, and I really enjoyed making meaningful changes or helping people make meaningful changes. And so that led me towards PT. And the athletic training side of it was because I enjoyed the sports and the rehab. My ultimate dream would be to take somebody from an acute injury and bring them all the way through to the strength and conditioning from that. And so looked for different programs and schools that offered that, and Shenandoah happened to be one of the programs that offered that dual curriculum, and that's kind of how I went that route.
Okay. What other schools were you looking at? Because I know, I'm not trying to like toot SU's horn or anything, but I know there's only a couple schools that offer at least the consecutive dual track, or I guess doing the 2 degrees at the same time. I know there's other places out there where you can get like a bachelor's in AT and then go straight into PT. But I'm just curious. I don't think I've ever heard your story, because again, I didn't work your interview day.
Yeah. So I had looked at a couple of other schools. I'm from upstate New York. I hail from upstate New York, and so I was looking in the northeastern section of the country to try to see if there was any other programs that were out there. And there was one in Boston that offered both that kind of like athletic training and physical therapy degree, that dual program. But Shenandoah set itself apart for a lot of different reasons that we'll get into after you share your stories and everything else as well. Yeah.
Okay, so you did do a fair bit of shopping around the country. And so when you went in, you specifically were looking for a place that fit your criteria, that had PT and AT concurrently.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
I wasn't sure.
Yeah, and it was
Go ahead.
okay. Yeah, it was actually it was a weird kind of moment. I distinctly remember this because I was in New York still at the time, and I was still trying to figure out, like where I wanted to go and what direction I wanted to take. And I remember waking up at 3 a.m. one day, bolting right out of bed, and just sitting up and being like, I need to look for schools in Virginia. It was almost like that word, like that wasn't my thought. It was just like coming out of my head. And so I just remember waking up and being like, oh my God, I need to look at schools in Virginia like right now. And I remember at like 3:10 in the morning, came across Shenandoah's website, and it's a pretty cool website. And I was kind of intrigued, and I kept looking further, and I saw that they had a dual program, and I was like, oh my God, I need to look into this further. And then lo and behold, here I am.
Interesting. So previous to that, you had not thought about applying to Virginia schools. You just had some sort of epiphany.
Yeah, it was weird. It was really weird. I just remember waking up and being like, I need to look at this now. And it was 3 a.m, and I remember how weird that felt to me. But I don't know, some kind of push somewhere, maybe.
Interesting. I think I obviously have a little bit of a different perspective because, one, I wasn't looking for a dual program. I just wanted to get into PT school. I wanted to get into the athletic training world as well. Excuse me. But my I don't know, my path was a little bit different. I went to UVA and had always wanted to get into their sports medicine program. And when I got into it, I realized that things had been changing. The AT degree had moved more towards an entry level master's. And so a lot of schools were no longer offering the bachelor's programs. And so UVA was no longer accredited as an undergraduate program for athletic training.
Hmm.
And so I just didn't have that option anymore. And so I kind of changed directions and I went just to pre PT. Initially, I thought I was going to go to school, become an athletic trainer, work for a little bit, and then go into PT school. And then when I
Hmm.
found out that they were no longer accredited, and in order to become an athletic trainer, I need to go to a 1 year transitional master's program. And
Okay.
so things got redirected, and so I went truly pre PT and was applying to, man, I applied to everywhere in Virginia. So ODU, VCU, um, Duke, Maryland, Lynchburg, um, GW, pretty much everywhere in Virginia and then like close to Virginia, because I have
Hmm.
some family stuff going on and I wanted to stay close and didn't want to be
Sure.
too far away in case something happened. But then when I went to the interview day for Shenandoah, I found out that they had this dual program and got to meet a lot of interesting people through the interview process, which I thought was fantastic. And that kind of sold me. And then I, of course, went into the dual program backwards because I just did PT for a year. And then someone was like, hey, you can still go into the athletic training program. And I was like, you can? And so kind of weaseled my way in that way. And then the rest is history. But I didn't have that criteria like you did when I was looking for schools. I really just wanted to get in somewhere because my grades weren't great coming from college. I didn't think I was going to be a great applicant on paper, and I think that's why I got denied at a lot of places that didn't offer an interview process. That were just looking at, this is you on paper. This is we think you're either good enough or not good enough to get into our program.
Okay.
Whereas the interview process at Shenandoah, where obviously we keep talking about that because it's where we both currently go to school. um, but having an interview process was very integral, I think, into me being able to get into graduate school because I don't think that I would have been given an opportunity to pursue that if I wasn't able to talk to somebody and really, not really like argue or plead my case, but show that I was going to be a competent clinician and that I had interpersonal skills and could hold a conversation and had a decent background in kinesiology, biomechanics, all that
Hmm.
other stuff.
Sure. Yeah. No, it's cool. It's cool to see that both of us have had two different perspectives and different ways of coming about it, but we both ended up at the same place. And you spoke a lot just now about the interview process. How valuable do you think that is for different schools and for different people that are applying to different schools to use the interview process?
I mean, I think it's a fantastic um, way to figure out not if you are right for a school, but if a school is right for you, right?
Hmm.
Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter really where you go. You're going to get a pretty much equivalent education to pass boards and to become an entry level physical therapist. Certainly, there are other schools that are maybe have better programs in research or a stronger curriculum with, orthopedics or pediatrics. And there may be maybe those specialties that you want to look into and find out and apply to schools that have those specialty curriculum things.
Hmm.
But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter where you go because a lot of the learning that happens in the PT world is post professional. It's working with patients, taking Con Ed courses, keeping up to date on research, and then figuring out a lot of stuff on your own or with mentors or um, in the field. So for me, it wasn't. I don't think I was so hung up on like a specific school, but
Hmm.
what the interview process did is it led me really kind of get a better taste and a better understanding and idea of who the professors were, what the school environment was like, what the students were like, what their social lives were like, what to expect as far as like loan money that I have to pay back, rent that I'd have to find in the area.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think just having that ability to really ask questions and ask pertinent questions that affect you. Like, I know for me it was, what do I do for healthcare? Like, do you guys provide healthcare? Because I don't have it and I need it.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of loans are out there? Are there scholarships available to me? But if I had just applied to a school that looked at my paper transcripts and didn't consider me as a human, or didn't offer me the ability to like interact with students or interact with professors to figure out if that was an environment that I wanted to be a part of,
Mm-hmm.
I think things would have gone completely differently.
I completely agree with
So I
you
know I'm
there.
kind of like word vomiting and like ranting, and there's just like this stream of consciousness that's coming out. But I think what I'm trying to say ultimately is that the interview process really lets you find the place that where you're going to succeed the most at. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
you're trying to find that environment, that fertile soil that you're going to grow from. And for both of us, obviously it was Shenandoah, but for, you know, the larger PT school population, there's tons of students that are doing fantastic and phenomenal things across the country.
Right. Right. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. You had mentioned that the interview process is not only for the faculty and the the staff there to get an idea of who you are, but also to see how you fit there, and also your experiences and how well you feel like you're going to fit there. It's almost like when you go to the interview, yes, the faculty is interviewing you, but you're also interviewing them too. You're going to be spending a considerable amount of time, the next 3 years of your life, and a considerable amount of money to this, to this personal development that you're about to embark on, right? And so you want to make sure that the place that you're going to is going to be a good fit for you as much as it's going to be a good fit for them.
Yeah. Because, I mean, you are going to be spending a lot of your time with those people and with those professors.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, we're all going to get on each other's nerves because, you're with the same people for 3 years. But at the same time, as much as that feels like a curse, like 2 or 3 days out of the year, it's a blessing. The other 362.
Right.
So make sure you find an environment that's where you need to be, and most likely you'll have that sort of aha moment. I know I did when I found our school. Um, I remember just driving back and having a smile on my face, going, "Oh my God, grad school is going to be awesome." I didn't wake up in the middle of the night and go, I need to apply to schools in Virginia. But I did have that moment where I was like, this just feels right. Like I can see myself here. And I mean that's the
That's
whole point of the interview day.
Yes, could not agree more. And that's for anybody that's looking to apply to different schools. Take advantage of the open houses. Take advantage of those times that you get to interact with students and other faculty members and professors and all of that, because it really gets you a bead on what the school is like. And a lot of times, if you do come and you just set up a meeting with the professor and you still have some downtime and you see some students that are just hanging out, go up there, be confident, and ask them questions. 9 times out of 10, probably even 10 times out of 10, they're more than excited to talk about the school that they chose and why they chose that school. And they're more than willing to share that information because guess what? We were in that situation that you're about to be in. So,
Yep, and we both have seen hundreds of students that come in and ask all the same questions, and I mean, we're always happy to talk about anything and everything.
exactly.
Now, kind of on the flip side of that, if you're applying to a school that doesn't have an interview process, there are oftentimes open houses or like accepted student days that you can go to and still kind of put a face to your name. And
Mm-hmm.
so I know they don't, it maybe may not make that much of a difference, but having a face to a name makes you stand out a lot more on your application than just, you know, John Smith, 3.8 GPA, you know, fraternity, president of whatever club, um, played sports, captain of his sports teams, did volunteering. Because that's going to be pretty much the same thing as everyone that's applying to PT school.
Exactly. Exactly. So you need to find ways that you can make make yourself stand out, not only by meeting them in person and showing them what a great person you are, but you just brought up a great point, Jake. Um, you know, what kind of things do you think you should put into your application, or what kind of things what advice would you give to somebody who is applying to help them stand out and get to that first round?
It's funny because this is something that I get asked all the time from college kids that I've met, like at Shenandoah, UVA, JMU, wherever. Um, and I think there's probably like two or three things. Um, there's three big things for me, and one of them is the interview process, taking advantage of that. The other two would be more specific to your actual application. The first one would be what I like to call diversifying your portfolio, and not that any of us have any money because we have small mortgages that pay back in student loans, but just the idea of not being like every other person that's applying to PT school, right? Because how many times when you ask prospective students what made you get into PT, or what made you think about wanting to be a physical therapist, there's two answers that I get all the time, and it almost kind of sickens me. One is the athlete who got injured in high school, who went to PT, and then realized that, hey, I could be a physical therapist. This is kind of cool. The other is the person that loves people so much that they have to help people, and PT is a field where you get to help people, right? How many times have you heard those two stories?
At least 80%.
Yeah, most prospective students, when they're asked that question, that's like the two stories that they go to.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because a lot of people are motivated by that. I would challenge you, if that is your response and you're listening to this, to really think deep about why you are pursuing this career and what is motivating you at an intrinsic level. Really kind of introspect and reflect and try to determine what your motivations are.
Yeah, and I know it seems I'm probably come across a little harsh, but I'm not trying to say that if those are your two reasons that you should pick something else. Just make sure, like what Mike is saying, make sure that you kind of flesh that out a little bit more, right? Make it a little bit more personal. Don't make it seem like super stereotypical like it is with a lot of applicants. Like really bring out part of you. If it explain the injury, talk about how, after shadowing in physical therapy, you can see what it's like to be both a patient and a clinician. You can walk the line. You understand what, you have empathy for the patients that you're helping treat. And that experience being injured really was like life-changing because of that. And now you can understand the pain that your patients are going through, versus just saying, oh yeah, I tore my ACL in high school and I thought PT was cool.
From that example that you had just said, it sounded like you were speaking a little bit from the heart there. Do you have an example of that from your previous experiences?
I like how you went straight for it with from the heart. Yeah, actually, so when I was in undergrad, I ended up having to get an ICD put in, so like a pacemaker defibrillator combo. So I actually had surgery, and they implanted this device inside my my right ventricle, and it was more of a kind of preventative thing. But my mom died when she was 24, and her brother died when he was 22 of very just like crazy cardiac issues. And I was diagnosed with dilated cardiomyopathy. And so my junior year of college, when I was applying for, or getting ready to apply for PT school, I had this like life-changing experience where I had to have surgery. I didn't know what was going on. Ended up kind of spiraling into depression and trying to come back and rehab for my own injury. And so I kind of used a lot of those experiences, that personal experience, like what I was talking about, being able to see life as a patient and also as a clinician, and kind of being able to meld those two things together. I think that helped strengthen my application. And that kind of goes into my second, or I guess my third tip, because the first one was take advantage of interviews and meet people in person. Second one was diversify your portfolio, and we'll kind of come back to that a little bit more and continue to flesh that out. But the third one is don't write what I like to call a Mick essay, right? So again, you don't want to be like everybody else. You want to find ways to set yourself apart. And so because essays are mandated for PTCAS and I think ATCAS applications too, you really want to set yourself apart, and you want to find ways to do that. So try not to have the stereotypical Webster's Dictionary defines, physical therapy as essays, right? Make it really personal. Try to use different literary techniques if you're a good writer. Use first person, bring in different parts of, like narratives. So for me, my essay was kind of like a first person, almost like stream of consciousness, I guess, where I was working with a patient. She was grimacing because something was painful, and that seeing her in pain triggered something in my brain where I could instantly empathize with that because I'd been there like 6 months before, right? Like she had to relearn how to walk and run and all that, and I couldn't use my arm for 6 or 8 weeks. I had to put on dude, you would have loved me in college. I had to put on nothing but flannels with one arm for like 8 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
I felt like I was living in like 1992 and exclusively listening to Alice in Chains. But
brings flashbacks.
Yeah. But because of that experience, because I had, this like life-altering surgery that to me was like hugely instrumental in changing my perspectives on a lot of different things, I was able to kind of draw on that and then write an essay about it. And so, instead of writing the stereotypical like, I love people, I love working with people, I have perseverance and I'm smart and I'm good and I can do these things, I kind of told a story, and then from that story people could pull out their own impressions of me, like, oh, this person is motivated or strong or empathetic, caring, because of the way that I presented myself in this narrative.
I couldn't agree with you more, Jake. It sounds like everything that you just said, you pulling from your experiences, which is great. And not only that, but when you're writing your essay, you're not just telling people what you're capable of doing, you're showing them and you're painting a picture. And I think that's huge.
Yeah.
That description, any way you can create an image in their head of who you are on paper, by that description, vivid descriptors, or even just, showing them is good.
And I guess the big part of that, one thing that my AP high school literature teacher always told us when we were applying for colleges and kind of had this whole process as well, was you really need to make that first sentence really pop off the page, right? Because I mean, you've been in interviews too. Like I've sat in with professors, and we look at your application, we can read your essay, we can see all your grades and transcripts and everything. And a lot of times if I read the essay and it doesn't grab me in those first 10 seconds of reading it, I'm not going to read it, because it's not, there's really nothing there that I want to pull from. But if you can have a really, really catching, first couple sentences and tell a story, paint a picture, and let us draw our own conclusions from what you're giving us, I think that means so much more. And it shows that you can write, and you need to be able to have, good writing skills in PT school, because you're going to be doing tons of documentation for the rest of your life.
Forever.
Yes, which is probably the worst part of the job. I don't think anybody likes to do documentation.
No.
But kind of with that, so we talked about, diversifying yourself and standing out. And so part of that, not only, painting pictures with your personal experiences and letting people really get to know you and what makes you tick and move and feel and act and all that stuff. But when you're picking things to put on your application, like your extracurricular activities, try to do stuff that like nobody else does. I know for me, and you're probably going to be a little bit different because of your second career, and you already did a bunch of cool stuff before you went into PT school. um, and you were pretty diversified already and had a good base of experience. But for me, all my classmates were going to do practicums just in PT, right? And that was a way for them to like knock out both class credit, excuse me, and also work on their volunteer hours. But
Sure.
in my case, I was already doing volunteer hours, and I wanted to do something different with my practicum. So I talked to my special education, or sorry, adaptive PE instructor. So it's basically working with physical education for like special education populations. So what I ended up doing is I worked with an adapted physical educator in the Charlottesville school area, and we'd go to different like middle schools, elementary schools, and high schools in the area, and work with students that had either intellectual disabilities, physical disabilities, or any other sort of accommodation that they needed to be able to complete physical education. And part of that was volunteering with Special Olympics and doing Special Olympics soccer and golf and basketball and all these different sports in the Charlottesville area. And so I think for me, instead of just going into a practicum and doing like the cookie cutter thing like everyone else in my class was doing, I did something completely different that was related to, rehab, PT,
Mm-hmm.
strength training, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But it was also something that on my application kind of set me apart a little bit because I got to work with these special populations that, I would down the road be doing physical therapy with.
Right. So not it. You basically are able to showcase different experiences that you've had, like you said, set you apart. But it also is applicable to the field of physical therapy. But it's just outside of that. Oh yeah, I got 10 hours in inpatient. I did my 15 hours in an outpatient or whatever is required from you. That's great. And I think to add on to that, I think it's important that you do these things outside of the typical norm, but you also follow and pursue your passions. Find things that you're really engaged in. Uh, don't go for the experiences just to get the experience of doing something, but really understand that you're doing these because you're passionate about this and you're following those passions. That stuff comes out in the interview. It's particularly when the professors will ask you questions about these different experiences that you had. If they see you light up because you're passionate about the experience that you had with this special education population, it's just that much more powerful than if you just said, "Yeah, I just did this thing. I wanted to diversify myself." That's not going to go over so well.
No, don't just regurgitate my advice, my like BuzzFeed like you know clickbait titles for my tips. You definitely don't want to do that. Um, but but kind of along with that, even just within those observation hours that like every prospective PT student has to do, there are a lot of people don't realize how broad the scope of PT is. Right? I feel like you're required to do outpatient and inpatient, like as part of your shadowing hours. But like, what about pediatrics or what about school-based PT or working or volunteering on like a neuro floor, working with
Mm-hmm.
individuals who have had traumatic brain injuries or someone who's rehabbing from a stroke. Um, there's just so much more to PT, like aquatic therapy. Um, there's even like hippotherapy with horses. There's physical therapists that go out and you use horseback riding to help. Oftentimes, like younger children who happen to have like cerebral palsy or some sort of developmental condition. But there's like so much cool stuff out there that most people don't think about. So I think part of this whole process of like researching your schools and the areas that you want to work in, um, really go out and experience those things. If you want to be a sports physical therapist, go try to find a clinic or find somebody with an SCS and like shadow with them. Go shadow athletic trainers working in like at your college. See what it's like to be in the training room. See what it's like to work in like a rehab setting with athletes, if that's what you want to do with PT. right? Because that setting's going to be different, even though it may be more athletic training based. You're still going to get a taste for what it's like to be a PT that works in that particular setting. And again, it may be an experience that you're passionate about that sets you apart from other people, instead of just going to like a traditional orthopedic clinic where, you know, maybe they get an athlete.
Right.
So
I couldn't agree with you more. That you hit the nail on the head there, Jake. Pursue your passions. Find extracurriculars that are meaningful to you. The field of physical therapy is huge. I'm still kind of bummed that hippotherapy doesn't have to do with
dude,
hippos.
that's oh my, that was like the biggest letdown for me in our neuro class. I just hippos are just so cool. They're just I wish I could do therapy with them.
They're majestic.
They're just beautiful animals.
They're glistening in the sun.
Their tusks are very deadly.
They are.
They can.
More people die from hippo attacks than like something else. I think isn't that one of the more deadly animals because they think they're so cute and then they'll go up to them and then
dude,
get
they'll
eaten.
snap canoes in half. Like, so there's probably a reason why hippotherapy is not with actual hippos. It's much safer with horses.
This is true. They tend to be a
Still
little bit more docile.
kind of a bummer, in my opinion.
So those are some pretty good tips that we had for applications. So we had, diversify your portfolio, find different ways that you can get experiences outside of the cookie cutter world. We've also had not writing a Mick essay, right, as you described. The interview is crucial. It's a great opportunity for you to put a name to the face, as well as kind of vet the school that you're going to get an opportunity to see how well you fit in that program and how well that program fits with you. So those are some big points there. Are there any other points that you'd like to say or tips for applications?
No, I think that all kind of hits it. I mean, those are the three that I typically go to. But I think at the end of the day, like, it sounds so cliched, but it's true. Just be yourself, right? Because whether you're vetting the school or the school's vetting you, you have to be you. You can't put on some sort of like fake demeanor just to try to get into PT school, right? If they're not impressed with who you really are, the school's probably not worth you going there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And that reminds me of a story that you told me about group interviews, and maybe we want to save that for after we talk about group interviews, or we can talk about it now. But you just mentioned that about finding if the school is right for you or not.
Yeah, sure. I'll go ahead and this is one I've told this to tons of different students that have come through, interviews at SU, and I know we, again, like I've said it earlier in the podcast, I know we plug our school because we go there, but I mean, if we went to any other school, we'd do the same thing, and that's kind of what it's like at interview day. If you're a student working interview day, typically you're going to try to plug the school, but one thing that I try to do is just be very honest with students and remind them that, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter where you go. It doesn't matter if you have the highest grades in your class or, you scrape by with B's and C's. Because if you go through a PT program, you're going to be a physical therapist, right? Mm-hmm. And as long as you try your hardest and you connect with people and you can make positive impacts, you're going to be probably a pretty good physical therapist, right? There's always room for improvement, but if you can make it through school, your heart's in the right place, your passion is there to help people achieve their goals, you're going to be good at it. But part of the whole interview process is going to be, figuring out if this is the school for you. Mm-hmm. And so the story that I tell is of my my group interview experience at George Washington. Right, so when I was coming through PT school applications, I had interviews at Shenandoah, George Washington, and Marymount. And Marymount and George Washington were group interviews. And group interviews can be pretty weird, especially when you're sitting around there's like 10 of you in a room with a professor, and they ask a question and pretty much everyone answers it the same way. And so it's again coming back to like, how can you find ways to separate yourself? Because you have to be different in the group setting, right? You want to show who you are. And so we went through these different rooms. We were given like scenarios of like things that we would do. They asked us questions about like HIPAA, ethical dilemmas, all sorts of stuff. And then they brought us into this big lab, and they split us into groups of about, I don't know, 5 or 6 people. And they gave us this like big sheet of paper. And the instructions were write a list of 5 things that you would take to a desert island, right?
Mm.
And to me, this was like, if you know me, which you know me, um, it was kind of a challenge for me, like in my creativity, right? Because I tend to like, I want to know the parameters. I want to know what I'm working with because I'm gonna try to make it, especially like fun group activities like this. I'm gonna try and make it fun. I want people to be involved. I want it to be engaging. I want it to be fun. I want it to be silly. I want it to be creative, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I figured like everyone here is afraid. All these other groups are probably just gonna write down like, 5 stereotypical things like, yeah, like books or my favorite CD or water, because I don't know how to make a filtration system with the T-shirt on my back, or it's just like Flint and Tinder, like normal stuff like that.
Can you bring Bear Grylls?
I mean, you could if you thought outside the box. Um, but so what in my group, they listed 5 things, and they're like, all right, guys, who wants to bring books? And like they started doing that. I was like, oh, hold up. This is like an experience or like an opportunity for us to be really creative and like show, who we are as individuals. And so I was like, all right, guys, they didn't give us any rules. There were no parameters. We just had to come up with 5 things, right? Well, what does our island look like? And so I took a marker and I started drawing this island, and we started like kind of spitballing these ideas. And we came up with this idea that this island had like an abandoned theme park on top of it. So there's like roller coasters and like, bathrooms and food courts and all this stuff. It was fully functioning amusement park. It just didn't have people. Like we were the only people on the island. And so just by having that on the island, we had running water, we had electricity, we had shelter if we needed it. So we had all this like these basic amenities. Is that the word? Amenities. We had all these basic amenities that like I knew all the other groups weren't going to have. So from that point on, we just started going like super creative with it, right? We had like a chicken nugget farm on the island. We had the palm trees, instead of like, having coconuts as like their fruit. They had Pop-Tarts of various flavors. So if we got hungry, we could go like pick chicken nuggets from the ground or that were ready to eat, or go climb a tree and like get Pop-Tarts.
Breakfast of champions right there.
There's like cows that when you milk them, it like automatically turned into like a milkshake. There was like a huge population of like Maine lobster on the north side of the island, so we could always have like lobster dinners. And because the amusement park was there and they had like like kitchens, we could cook everything. And so it just became this like creative, like in the span of 15 minutes, we took something that was supposed to be very simple and we just completely undermined everything that exercise probably was, and we turned it into this like beautiful thing, right? And so at the end of the 15 minutes, we have to, all the groups select a representative and they go up and they explain, why they chose stuff. And so we end up being the last group to go. And just like I thought, everyone's like, oh, we'd bring Flint and Tinder, or we really wanted to bring this like book of poetry because it really speaks to us, just like and I'm in the back kind of like, oh, this is so boring. And finally I get up there and I'm like, so before we talk about the 5 things, like let's talk about the island that we live on. And so I have to like start explaining like all this crazy stuff that we came up with, and all the students are laughing. Everybody's having a great time. Finally start reading off the list, and I'm talking about how instead of Flint and Tinder, we chose to bring a flamethrower, so that if there's like, anything from lighting a fire, lighting a match, dealing with animals, or if we need to do some sort of deforestation to build our next, housing development on the island, we have this flamethrower to just like burn everything with. And then we had a bunch of other
Perfect.
like really silly stuff too. Probably like samurai swords or something, because I feel like that's the next logical thing in my brain that I would have put on this list.
Yeah.
But so all of the students are having a great time. We're all laughing, and I feel good because I get to be, like goofy, creative me in an environment like that, and I got to push the boundaries of like, what this assignment was, and I thought I was doing something right because I was really trying to
Hmm.
show I was just being me. I wasn't
Right.
trying to put on a show. I was just being me. And the whole time that I'm doing this, the professor that's like our proctor or monitoring us is just giving me this like death stare. And she just looks so disappointed in everything that I'm doing. And I just knew at that moment like everyone was happy around me, everyone's laughing, but the professor was
Hmm.
just kind of like eyeing me down and was like upset that I had done this. And I was just like, yeah, I don't think I can go to this school, right? And there's tons of people that ended up going to that school and they probably had a blast and loved it and it was perfect for them.
Hmm.
But I just knew
Hmm.
for me that wasn't the right spot.
Yeah, that really hammers home everything that we've been trying to talk about trying to figure out what program is right for you and how important that is to find, which one is going to be the one that you're going to ultimately spend the next 3 years of your life at. And that's huge. For you knew at that point that that was not the school that you were going to go to, but your experience at Shenandoah was a little bit different, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was it, it was very different. I just knew, and it's funny because I ended up talking to Linda Burrow, who's she's kind of like an administrative assistant and runs much of the application process for the occupational therapy and physical therapy programs at Shenandoah. But I ended up talking to her for like 45 minutes. I don't think I talked to a single other student except for when I had to in this one room that we were in. But I ended up talking to her
Mhm.
for 45 minutes. And like she instantly knew who I was. She had my name tag. She actually forgot my name tag. But she knew who I was though, and like ran upstairs and got my name tag. And was apologizing, and then we struck up a conversation and found out that she lived in a neighborhood that I lived in at one point in time, and just like all these connections, and it was great. She just
Yeah.
everything about it, and then the professors and the students that I got to talk to from Shenandoah were just everything just clicked for me. Um,
Hmm.
what was your experience like? Did you have similar, different?
Yes. Yeah. And so, I had applied to a couple different schools. I applied to Mass General Hospital, the Institute of Health Professions, and applied to a few other schools along the Eastern Coast, and went to a couple different places for interviews. Shenandoah was one of my first interviews. I think it was like maybe the second, maybe it was the second or third one, um, which I think was a blessing and a curse at the same time, because I felt biased as soon as I went to went to the interview for Shenandoah. Nothing else seemed to compare. But again, all biases aside and everything else, my experience coming to SU was probably almost like the feeling you get when you're going home. Uh, I remember driving into the parking lot, parking my car in my suit, being all nervous, having my clipboard ready, sweating a little bit, making sure that my shirt was a little bit sweaty, but the sweat stains were okay and I could hide them. I was like really nervous. Um, and I remember, walking up to the doors. It was a little bit cold outside. And I just remember seeing one of the students. One of the students was standing outside with this huge smile on his face. He just says, "Hey, how's it going? You here for the interviews? All right, well, you're going to go downstairs. Somebody else will be able to help direct you as you get closer to the stairs." Held the door open for me. And I was like, oh my gosh, really friendly person, really just set the tone. Immediately, my anxiety about the situation that I was in was completely gone. Um, and then I walk a little bit further. Somebody else is by the stairs. Says, "Hey, come on right down the stairs. You're supposed to, go this way. You get your name tag." And I was like, "Oh, this is great. People are really friendly." And then I get down the stairs, and then I see Linda, and I'm like, "Hey, I'm here for the interviews." And she's like, "Oh, Mike, how's it going?" She like knew who I was and all this information about me already, which is kind of wild. Um, but just like you had said, we immediately struck up a conversation. Things were really easygoing. She really cared about how my trip was and like how my drive down from New York was. I thought that was great. Met a couple of the professors, felt the same way. And then just talking with the students and all that had this really like warming homecoming experience. Ended up, I ended up at the end of the day going out and grabbing dinner with a few of the PT
Um,
students that were there
just
already.
FYI, when Mike says dinner, he went to Margarita Monday.
Oh
Um,
yes,
so there's a little bit more than just food.
yes.
I found that out because
There,
one of my roommates was working interviews that day. This is like the one day that I didn't do interviews at our school.
hmm it was good, but the point that I'm trying to say, the point that I'm trying to say here, I mean the margaritas on point too. But what I'm trying to say is, um, that experience that I had was like no other, and every other place that I went to didn't compare to the experience that I had at that school. And so, you know, after talking with a lot of other students and what their experiences were, even at different schools, it's very similar. They feel as though they're going home or that's the right place for them. And so, for those that are applying to schools and really looking for that, there is going to be a moment where you say, ah, yes, I think I can see myself here for the next 3 years. And then, and things go from there.
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, that's what you're looking for, right? Because we want to be the best PTs that we can be. We want to be the best
hmm
humans that we can be, right? Because there's so much more to life than just physical therapy, right? We need to be good
Right.
sisters, brothers, moms, dads, cousins, dog owners, cat moms,
hmm
whatever it is. PT at the end of the day is going to be like 40 hours of your week. And there's still like
Right.
5 other days. Most of that's spent sleeping, but there's still 5 other days of time um, in
hmm
your working career life. And so finding a place where you can grow as a physical therapist, as a budding clinician, and as a human, and
hmm
finding ways to grow with your friends and with your colleagues and with your professors, so that everyone ends up becoming better. That's the place that you want to be, and that's where you're gonna
hmm
get your aha moment, just like Mike did, just like I did, where you know that
hmm
this is the right school for you.
Exactly.
And so I guess there's probably two other things I know that we've kind of talked about before, and that we get a lot
hmm
of questions on. Um, One would be grades, and two would be PT rankings, like PT school
Okay.
rankings. Do you have any
hmm
thoughts on either one of those, as far as like when you're considering applying, or um, I don't know, nervous about applying to certain schools because they set their GPA at a specific point? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm gonna give you the ultimate cop out on this one, and give you a quote that our professors like to say a lot. It depends. There's a lot of ambiguity when it comes to grades and rankings in that regard, um, and it depends on. Let's talk about rankings for a second here then. And so there is a ranking system, and schools are stratified. I'm sure those that are applying have seen that. Be like, oh yeah, like USC is ranked number one or they're ranked two now. Um, there's the way that I understand that the system is ranked, or the way that schools are ranked, has a lot to do with the amount of research that's published and pushed through, and the amount of I guess the credentials that the professors have as they go through. And I'm sure there's more. Do you know if there's anything else in regards to that, or is it mostly
I'm
research?
sure
Or
there's more to it, but I
hmm
believe, at least the way it was explained to me, is that the schools kind of vote for each other, and then a
okay,
lot of that, like you said, has to do with research and clinical specialties. But it's really just like what can they pump out and contribute to the community, and so a lot of those
right,
bigger research institutions end up getting the higher ranks because of that.
right. And so I think when you're thinking about rankings and trying to find the school that's important to you, or trying to find which schools to apply to, I think you need to ask yourself, what do you want to get out of your experience there? Are you interested in research and contributing in that way, and finding new techniques, or solidifying information that you can disseminate to the rest of the profession and help it grow that way? Are you looking for more hands-on kind of clinical experience with an emphasis there? Different programs are going to have different emphasis on what they do. One school may be a research-based institution, one may be more of like a learning clinical-based institution. And so trying to figure out where those values are in those schools, and looking for what matches with your values, I think, is more important than trying to find the most appropriate score or like where they rank.
Exactly. And I think that sometimes with those bigger research institutions, there tends to be more of that push on the research. And so
Mm.
sometimes your classes are taught by, I mean, sometimes you get like TAs kind of things for certain like lab sections or whatnot. Like maybe residents will teach it, and then sometimes your classes are a little bit bigger. There's a lot less one-on-one with your professors.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, there's opportunities, like you said, to get involved with research to be lab assistants. Whereas smaller schools, like our school, we're not a research institution. Our
Right.
professors do still publish research and contribute to the larger academic world.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that having that smaller school, even just being in a small town where kind of like everybody knows each other, there's more time to really get to know you know the people that are your professors,
Mm-hmm.
and not just like their classes or what books they want you to read. But like actually get to
Right.
know them as human beings, and sit down and like talk about real world things and like Game of Thrones and IPAs and just very stereotypical like grad schooly things.
That's the truth. Sorry, you had me hung up on IPAs.
I just was channeling my inner AJ. He only drinks IPAs.
Only. That's it. Exclusively.
Yeah.
Not even water.
No. Well,
Just
anything that's
IPAs.
not an IPA is water.
Did you? This is a complete non like sequitur. But did you ever hear that story about Humphrey Bogart? So he was shooting some film in the Amazon or something, and the whole cast and the crew were down there, and everybody on the cast and crew ended up getting like it wasn't dysentery because this is an Oregon Trail, but it was some kind of like gastrointestinal disease or something, and everybody was sick to their stomachs and like really really laid out, and but not Humphrey Bogart because the only thing that he drank when he was down there was whiskey.
What a boss. Oh
Seriously.
man.
So, yeah, but so there you go. Drink whiskey, not water.
So speaking of alcohol, it may or may not be something that you may use to cope with your grades, especially if you're like me coming from college, where
Mm,
my GPA, I had a 3.3 coming from UVA. It's not bad, but everyone else in my applicant pool had like 3.8s and 4.0s, and so I was certainly super nervous about.
mm,
Now that undergrad GPA was largely reflected on, a really bad first semester, and then having to go through and work 40 hours a week for pretty much my entire college career, have a
mm.
major surgery, and then deal with a lot of like health crisis at home with my dad.
Right.
Um, and so one of the good things is on PTCast they give you like a prompt to explain whether or not your grades are reflective of who you are as a student. And so for me, being able to explain that, and also like things like my essay and my interview, be able to pull out those personal experiences and really talk about like yeah, my grades may not be good, but at the same time, like I've had all these life experiences that let me um, kind of empathize with patients a little bit more. Um, and also my science GPA was high. It was like a
Mhm,
3.8.
mhm.
But it was just explaining that like I made bad decisions as a freshman. I was able to bounce back. I worked my butt off, and I had all these other things going on in my life, and I was constantly trying to juggle them. So I think for
Right.
me, even though that GPA was a little bit of a weakness on paper, when given the opportunity to explain it either on PTCast or in person, it allows you to provide a different perspective to the people that are trying to figure out if you're a good fit for the school.
Yeah, I agree. And just to kind of tie in with that too, like yes, grades are important to an extent. You need to have a good foundation and a solid base for your pursuits, in academia, particularly with a doctoring profession like with physical therapy. But you also need to have a certain level of empathy and people skills. And I think that really speaks to your ability when you're speaking in the interview, and then ultimately like your future in the profession. When professors are interviewing you and they're asking you questions and they're seeing how you interact in situations, they're seeing how you may interact with a patient too, and that's important.
Yeah, so things like, eye contact, body language, um, trying not to stumble through your words and like, kind of trip over yourself. And then just being confident. Like, I feel like professors are kind of like dogs. They can smell fear, you know? So like just be confident in who you are. You've made it this far, so clearly they want you. They're just trying to figure out if you're um, the best candidate. You know what I mean? Like it's like
Right.
you've already made it to the first or second date. You just gotta be you, and if the relationship's good, they'll swipe right. You're good to go.
Did you just make a Tinder reference?
Tinder, Bumble, any of the handheld dating apps, I believe. Yes, I did.
Impressive. Impressive.
I mean, we're gonna make obscure pop culture references. You referenced the Oregon Trail
True.
and Humphrey Bogart, so like in the same sentence.
True.
I feel like I can make a Tinder reference.
This is true. I think that's brilliant.
But those
We should. Oh, go ahead. Go
those
ahead.
people skills. What I was trying to say is those people skills are really important, especially
Yes.
the nonverbal ones. So just be confident. Look your professors in the eyes, smile, but not like a creepy smile. Just like a genuine, like, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm gonna blow you out of the water type smile.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. Still laughing about that.
What, my Tinder reference?
That's awesome.
I'm just glad that you used the Oregon Trail and dysentery. I can't tell you how many times I didn't make it that far because Mary kept dying of dysentery.
The dysentery was the worst.
Well, that and when you play Oregon Trail on hard mode and you only pack grandfather clocks, it makes it a little bit more challenging.
Yes, you got to be really creative.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
But I think that kind of hits all the stuff that we wanted to talk about. We shared some of our stories. You and I both kind of picking PT, how we ended up where we are. My weird group interview story that kind of opened my eyes as to like, an environment that I didn't feel like I was welcome in, and that ended up helping to kind of steer me in the right direction. And as well as like our tips for applications, diversifying your portfolio or your application, your extracurriculars, whatever you want to call it. Not writing a Mick essay, taking advantage of interviews or meeting with professors, open houses, things like that. Grades that they matter a little bit. PT school rankings, they don't really matter, right? Is that all the stuff we hit? We hit some other stuff too.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we talked a lot about those experiences and different ways that you can be successful with your application process and find ways to stand out. So I think we hit a lot of that. What before we kind of wrap things up, what would you say is like the ultimate thing that you would want to have our listeners get out of this podcast, or if you could sum it up, what would you say would be the big number one thing?
Ooh, way to put me on the spot, Mike. I don't know. When you boil all of this down, right? I mean, I know this is our first podcast. It's probably a little bit rough. You jump all over the place. Sorry, we jump all over the place a little bit, but that's just kind of how our brains work too. But I think what we're trying to accomplish here, and what PT school is trying to accomplish, and if you really step back and think about it, what every experience that you have, every day of your life, every interaction with somebody, everything's kind of trying to teach you a lesson, right? And I feel like all of this is geared towards becoming a better person. And so in our realm of the movement docs, I think our motto is always move forward. And so all these lessons, all these different bias challenging things, these different perspective challenging things, meeting people, looking at the world through, like a different lens, being challenged, failing, succeeding, failing again, getting back up, all of those things, everything is teaching you a lesson. You just have to be receptive to it. And, some of those lessons may be hard. Some of them may be, something you already know. But all of that's geared towards making you a better you and keeping you moving forward. And so I think that, I know that's kind of wordy and just like everything else, kind of all over the place. But we always want to move forward, whether it's, personal life, clinically, professionally, if you're trying to launch a small business, if you're trying to be a better husband, brother, wife, dog mom, cat dad, whatever it is, you always want to move forward and just be a better you.
Yeah. Strive to be more every day. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So I guess that's it for our first podcast, huh? It was a little scary. There were some mess ups,
Yeah.
but
Well, that's okay.
It's a learning experience, right? And we're gonna get better at this as time goes on, and hopefully, whether it's 2 people, 20 people, or 20 million people, as long as there's something that you guys can get out of what we kind of babble about, that's all that matters to us, right? Because we just want to keep moving forward.
Yeah. And if there's something that you guys want to hear about, or some information that you'd like us to talk about, please shoot us a message. You can visit the movementdocs@gmail.
Let me double check that.
No, it's tmdmovementdocs@gmail.com.
Okay. I'm glad you double checked that. Let me see.
Yeah, I think we better confirm it before I start spewing out some random email in Algeria or something.
We'll double check that. We'll double check that. I don't know how to do that right now. We're gonna edit this over.
You're gonna start getting some spam email from some Algerian prince, and that'll be it.
Wait, you mean I wasn't supposed to give him all my money?
You gave him all of your money?
Yeah, you said I was gonna double it back in return.
Oh, you're getting double back? Oh my God! Why didn't you email me?
I forwarded it to you. It must be in your spam folder.
Oh, it's probably that spam folder gets rid of all the fun things.
Why is it called? Have you ever thought about why it's called spam folder?
No, I never.
It's
I
like
never really
people
thought
don't
about that.
like spam, because the entire state of Hawaii loves spam. But
I think it's just Hawaii that likes spam, though, right?
But it is, just for clarification, it is TMD Movement Docs, DOCS, @gmail.com. So feel free to shoot us questions, give us feedback, and then hopefully soon we'll have our YouTube channel up and running. We'll post this on there, and then get onto iTunes pretty quickly after that. But this is kind of our first go at it, and we can't go anywhere but up from here.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, we always move forward, right? That's our motto.
Always move forward. The first step at being kind of good at something is kind of sucking at something.
Yeah.
So here we go. Yeah. To quote Finn, was it Jake the dog?
Yeah. And too bad it's not Adventure Time isn't the adventures of Jake and Fitz, or Fitz and Jake, whatever it is.
We should figure something out for that.
We'll do like a parody video or something, because
That'll
that'll be good. All right. Well, thank you guys for listening. Please give us any feedback, and like Mike said, reach out via our Gmail account, and we're going to be cranking out more of these, so get ready. Thank you guys for listening to the inaugural episode of the Movement Docs podcast. We really appreciate the support and hope you enjoyed it. For any and all questions, comments, concerns, complaints, feedback or general advice, please direct that to our email account. That's TMD Movement Docs, docs spelled DOCS, at gmail.com. Thanks again for listening.